Yes, he did.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Donnybrook. Thanks for inviting us into your living rooms or wherever you are. Let's meet our panelists for this edition, starting with Wendy Wiese, the news director from the Big 550 KTRS. Columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, one of our founders, Mr. Bill McClellan. Ray Hartmann, who writes for the Riverfront Times, which he founded in 1977, and now he's writing for rawstory.com, and you hear him on KTRS Radio, with or without that canine in the background, and also with us from 97.1 FM News Talk, 590 AM, and the St. Louis American, we welcome Alvin Reid. Well, Ray Hartmann, we're going to start with you. I'll tell you what, sometimes we begin the program with kind of notice of those who have died. And this week, we put on that list civility, because at the debate between the presidential candidates, civility really did die in America, or so it seemed. You write in this week's edition of rawstory.com that Republican senators should have been more forthcoming in criticizing President Donald Trump after his performance, but they seem to be pretty quiet. Why did you come up with this?
I didn't say they should be. I observed that they weren't, and I think it was pretty telling. It included Roy Blunt and Josh Hawley that had Donald Trump had a even mediocre night, they would have all been out there, congratulating him and genuflecting and so forth. We're a local show, but folks, we got whatever it is, less than 5 weeks now, and it isn't hyperbole to say that the future of our democracy is at stake. And what the debate showed, even though we knew what Donald Trump was, this really this sort of exposed it at a level that wasn't really seen before.
So sorry about it. Alvin Reid decided not to even watch it because you thought it was not even worth your time, Alvin, on this week to watch the presidential debate.
Well, I had decided long ago that when they decided to even have them, I said, I know how this is going to turn out. And I said the first was just going to be a complete disaster. And listen, I'm not trying to be partisan, although people will say I am. But it's like, hey, we're going to have a debate with a 6-year-old who's acting out. I mean, you can't debate. You can't discuss issues and things like that. So I knew what was coming. And so, my wife and I had Fargo taped from Sunday night, and we filled that 2 hours with watching that. And trust me, I was way more entertained by Chris Rock and that crew than I was by what was on the debate. And I know
the criminals in Fargo were better behaved than the two people running for president.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Hey, Alvin, you and Carmen are just behind the times. Mary and I watched Fargo Monday night.
Okay.
And that allowed us to watch the debate. And I thought it was really worth watching. I mean, it was a food fight and an embarrassment, but you had the President of the United States out there on the big stage trying to undermine the validity of an election. I mean, I thought that it's must-see TV because we've had 4 years of watching Mr. Trump, but watching him get up there and talk about how the election is going to be chaos and it's not going to end well, I thought, wow, I never thought I'd live to see the day that a president would do that.
Well,
but Bill, we've been questioning the validity of elections since Barack Obama was elected in 2008. We have spent the last 4 years questioning the validity of the election in 2016. I don't think I saw anything that was unexpected. It was cringeworthy, of course, to the nth degree. But I wasn't stunned. I mean, because this is This is who we are now. It's not.
Well,
it's,
that's true.
It's temporary.
Yeah, except when you say that we question the validity of elections, not before they're.
You're saying going into the election.
This is something else where you're telling people that this election is going to be rigged. I am stunned by it.
Yeah, but I wasn't stunned because he's been saying that. The interesting
he's been saying that for months.
Well, yeah, and the interesting thing about this election is it's the one time that the red silo and the blue silo see the same set of facts. I happen to watch both silos a bit, and you're literally like looking at a different country when you watch Fox than when you watch MSNBC and CNN. In Fox, it's all about the rioting and political correctness and all that stuff. And then on the other side, we're talking about things like what Trump showed the other night. The other thing, don't forget, is he absolutely refused to take a layup and in any way denounce white supremacy because he is a white supremacist. So that was the big headline besides what Bill's talking about. But I think that what's different about this debate, and I agree with Bill that it was worth watching, was that everybody got to see it. In other words, everybody got to see the same set of facts. And Donald Trump has made a calculated decision that he's going to win either one of two ways, either by turning out his base or by cheating. And he has given up on what he likes to call suburban housewives. Wendy, I'm sure you appreciate that term, but he has given up on that. He's given up on trying to convince folks. I'll tell you who was benefited by this.
I might respectfully disagree with you, Ray. I do think he's given up on suburban housewives. It sure looks that way, but I'm not saying he's cheating.
You're not saying he's cheating. He said on TV that if he loses, it's fixed. If he wins, it's okay.
Well, as Wendy points out, that's what both sides kind of say.
No.
In 2016, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. This is the first time.
In 2016, his election was challenged through.
This is the first time we've had a sitting president cast doubt for people on both sides about the legitimacy of an American election.
Casting doubt is not cheating.
Yeah, it's worse than cheating if you're the president.
No, let's not parse over words. Let's move on to other stuff, Charlie.
Okay, so now we have a new provocateur, but I appreciate that. I agree with you, Bill. I appreciate that. Okay.
Wait a minute. Wait, where do I fall into this?
No, seriously. Alvin, you're our next one. By the way, anything Bill says, I do. He says jump, I say how high, and I appreciate that.
Bill has a good point.
He does. How about this, Alvin, Reid? This week, the salaries for some of the heads of our cultural institutions were reported by the Sunday St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And it turns out we don't have to run a bake sale for any of these guys. Jeffrey Bonner's total compensation, including 12 weeks of vacation and a $51,000 car and a travel allowance for his wife. This is for heading up the zoo. He gets more than $1 million. Brett Benjamin, how about that? Aptly named. He's getting the Benjamins, almost 1 million of them a year. And then the one person who, believe it or not, of the 5 cultural heads, the woman makes the least amount of money, Frances Levine.
No kidding.
No kidding, right.
That's
wait. She's also last hired. You know, that whole thing, last hired, first fired. Okay. I'm stealing this I heard my daughter say this, Bryson. She said, if I ran this zoo, it would be a totally different zoo. And I always love that because if I ran that zoo this year, I would say, or whatever this compensation, whatever I got, I said, listen, I've got people furloughed. We were closed. I've got, everything going on. I'm going to forgo my bonus. I'm going to forgo, whatever raise I got this year and take that money and you could put it to people. You could put it to food for the animals. You can put it to wherever you want to, but I'm not going to take it because I make plenty of money. I think that's been lost in America, not just with the Zoo Museum District. So, I'm disappointed. Ray, I'll turn the stage over to you right now so I can finish my point.
All right. I think these are taxpayer-supported institutions, and it's very rare in this country that those kinds of institutions are taxpayer supported with the Zoo Museum District, which until now I have been big supporter of. I think at some point and I very rarely question salaries. These are excessive, they're obscene, and there is absolutely, starting with the zoo and the art museum, there is no accountability to the public whatsoever because everyone feels so strongly about them. And I would start, in the name of COVID, by repealing the obscene sales tax that St. Louis County voters and did for whatever theme park the zoo wants to do.
Wendy,
and when you look at what we can't do, we have one of the high. Charlie always points out that one of the highest sales taxes in the country, and now we're doing it to support this. This to me is absurd.
I was reading the emails that we send back and forth amongst the panel leading up to the program, and when this story broke, and there was so much hand wringing, and not only within the panel, but everywhere else. I was expecting to be completely horrified. I wasn't horrified at all. When people talk about St. Louis, they talk about the zoo. They talk about the art museum. I'm a taxpayer, Ray. I'm just telling you how I feel. Great. These are people with a certain set of skills. I sound like Liam Neeson, but they have a very specific set of skills. And our zoo has a lot to do with the expertise of people like Dr. Bonner. I did not have I was jealous of the amount of vacation that he gets, but I think he's earned it. He is one of the leaders in his field of zoological parks. Do we want to go in and have him leave for San Diego, which I know they would roll out the red carpet
to
have him in the San Diego?
Oh,
actually,
I do. Yeah. We're world class. Ray, we're world class.
Ray,
seriously.
This is 2020.
We are world class. Right. Let's be serious. In St. Louis, world class, top of the heap is our zoo. I'm not talking about a salary, but going back to what you said. Okay, let's say it's horrible, it's obscene, it's all that. So what are we going to do? The rich people make too much money and take advantage of it. So let's take it out on the people that don't have money but can go to the museum and can go to the zoo and can do these things for free. Hey, now, it's maybe it's different counties from across America, not just St. Louis and St. Louis County. But what I'm saying is, why on earth would we start talking about charging to get into the zoo when that's what made our zoo world class, and we don't have anything world class?
Hey, what do you say, Bill? Bill, you go to the zoo a lot.
I do. I'm a grandfather of the zoo, or what the sheep membership, the grandparents membership, and I kind of agree with Alvin. I don't think that these people should have taken bonuses and raises this year, but it's a great zoo, and it's really hard to criticize Bonner too much.
Okay, let's move on to another topic. Charlie? Let's move on because we're running behind schedule.
Can I respond to that at all?
Well, let's go to
because I didn't bring up charging.
Respond? I think you had enough time. Let's move on, for heaven's sake.
I just don't think it's as. I think we do not have. I understand it's the mantra. And by the way, Dr. Bob didn't start the zoo.
I feel like Chris Wallace here. Come on, man, shut up. What did Joe Biden say? Bill, should we move on to the next topic? Okay, thank you, Bill. And that would be directed toward you, because Missouri voters this year are going to decide if they should extend the term limits for those who serve as state auditor, secretary of state, attorney general, and lieutenant governor. The limit would be 8 years. That's the same limit we currently have for the treasurer and the governor. Do you think we should extend term limits to the auditor, secretary of state, lieutenant governor, and attorney general?
Well, I'm against term limits. At one time, I was all for them, and then I saw how they have not helped the Missouri legislature at all. And not only taking away institutional memory, but it makes everybody too ambitious. I mean, they get there and they want to make a name for themselves right away. And these guys who are getting termed out, the governor gives them big commission jobs, and it's just dirtier than it ever was. And I'm no longer in favor of term limits. With the auditor and the attorney general, I'm not so sure about them, but it's been a disaster, I think, for the legislature. So I'm going to vote against it.
Well, I'm going to vote for it. I just think that it's kind of like unclogging your sink or your toilet. That, those first few moments are horrible, but then it kind of smooths out. So I just think don't be in a rush just yet. There's a reason that the president, whoever the president is, can only serve 2 terms, and the governor. And I think even getting down to the legislature, if you turn the offices over and enough time goes by, I think good things would happen. I do. And maybe I'm Pollyannish, Bill. I hear exactly what you're saying, but I think all in all, let's give it time before we declare it a complete disaster.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, back in the day, we had some lawmakers who spent way too much time in office, like Bob Griffin, Jim Matheson. We did then enact term limits, but then you find that the lobbyists had more knowledge than the lawmakers. And the lawmakers didn't leave government, like you say, Bill. They just got on commissions so that they could extend their pension eligibility. Whatever you do, it turns out to be a mess, it seems, in the state capitol. All right, Ray Hartmann, I want to ask you about a plan in the city of St. Louis that also goes in front of voters. It's called the Nonpartisan Voting Plan, and it's Proposition D on the city's ballot. Among other things, the top 2 vote getters in the primary could be 2 Democrats, a Democrat and a Republican, or 2 Republicans, whoever they are. They move forward to the final election as opposed to the leading Democrat and the leading Republican. However, this time around, there's something called approval voting. Can you explain that and also tell us if you're in favor of it?
I'm completely in favor of it. I think first of all, about 80% of the major cities in the country are nonpartisan, almost a large majority of them. And I think not only should the city, but the county should be nonpartisan, the governments. There's no reason for them to be partisan. If the voters approve Proposition D, which I think they're going to do, next year, instead of a primary, you're going to have a list of candidates for mayor and for controller and for each individual aldermanic seat. And voters get to decide who they approve of. In other words, they get to decide who you can pick 1 candidate, you can pick everyone on the list, you can pick 3, whatever you want to do. You can do that, and then what is now the primary. The top 2 vote getters then run off in what's now the general election. Most likely it's going to be the same result. A lot of people are hand-wringing about the approval process, which they used because ranked voting, which is what's done in a lot of other cities, wasn't possible because we're in the Stone Age with our computers. Wow. I think it's basically worth trying. I don't see what can go. One of the things about approval voting is it discourages negative campaigning because you're going to make people mad and they're not going to approve of you. And it also encourages people to be a little more, to go across race lines, reach out to others other than just their own constituents. So I think it's worth trying. And I do think it's going to pass and should pass.
Just to clarify, you could vote for 4 or 5 or 6 candidates on the ballot. You could approve all of them.
You're basically just setting up the 2 who get for the general election, as opposed to just picking your first choice. And I think it's fine. It just means that the vote, you're screening the finalists basically. And I think it's fine. You're still going to have 2 to pick from.
Me too.
Likely they're going to be the best.
I agree with Ray in that, listen, if they pass this in November, lo and behold, Tashara and Kara Spencer are going to be in the runoff in March. I pretty much have no doubt. I will kind of applaud Tashara because I think this is a philosophical argument because quite frankly, she knows that if we had this system 4 years ago, she'd be mayor of the city of St. Louis. So, she might be opposed to it, but I think it's on philosophical grounds. I applaud her for that because, like I say, she's got proof of the fact that it would work because she'd be the mayor.
Well, I don't know because won't candidates tell their supporters, vote for me with a bullet? In other words, 1 vote. Don't vote for others. Just give me the vote.
If you hadn't had 77 black candidates and then Tashara loses the election by 1,000 votes or whatever, she would have won. That's just all there was to it. Yeah, so if you eliminate that,
people are still saying that about the county executive race. I mean,
I agree. But yeah. I agree. If you had just not, if Montevani had decided to not run, or Zimmerman had decided to not run, the other Democratic candidate against Dr. Page probably would have won. I mean, that's just math.
I think that was the University City graduate student. Yeah. I'm sorry, Charlie.
No, I was just going to say, I think that the candidate with fervent, dedicated, passionate supporters will win.
Well, so it's democracy.
Okay. All right.
I think
when that took place in Boston,
the African American Aldermanic group, they're saying this will be the end of the Democratic Party in St. Louis.
And who's leading that charge? Jeffrey Boyd? I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, we had something similar to this in Boston, and there was a fringe candidate. Well, he wasn't fringe, but he was really out there by the name of Dapper O'Neill, and his supporters always gave him, they voted with a bullet. They voted for just him and nobody else, and he always won. Now, that wasn't for mayor.
His name was Dapper?
Dapper O'Neill. He was a legend in that town.
Related to Tip?
No relation whatsoever. Okay. No relation. All right, Wendy, we're moving on to you.
Dan?
Yeah. No relation. Okay. Wendy, Nichole Galloway, the state auditor, has been releasing one audit after another. Her audit of the treasurer's office, Tashara Jones, was pretty good. She gave her good remarks. When it came to the city of St. Louis, she was concerned that tax increment financing is being wrongly applied to the wrong neighborhoods. But when it came to St. Louis County, she gave a poor grade to the governance in the county. Among other things, the auditor there, Mark Tucker, is a great guy. He's just not auditing. In fact, he can't even name the audits that he's completed. In 2019, he had 3 audits, but one is in preview form, and the 2 others are still in draft form. And you really wonder, with 1 million residents, and it's the economic engine of the state, isn't it just a shame that St. Louis County is so backward when it comes to its government?
It is a shame. And what is even more of a shame is that she withheld the results of this audit until after the election, because so much of this, it goes back just to county governance as on the whole. And the fact that Stenger, she sort of outlines how Stenger was able to run completely wild. And I thought it was interesting that Lisa Clancy, proving the point that we've all known, that there is no accountability, she was arguing that the process of the audit and the that the county council isn't responsible for any of this. The county is a mess. And if Nichole Galloway knew that it was a mess before the election, then I think that she was derelict in her duty in not reporting this.
I disagree with that. I don't think you have any basis to know that she timed this on behalf of Sam Page. I mean, the audits come out when they come out. There may be some protocols. I don't know this in the world of auditors, not to have, to avoid releasing audits right before a contested election. I don't know that, but I don't think you should assume that she made some decision to sit on it for any reason. It came out when it came out. I don't know. I may be wrong.
There were other questions immediately following the primary. There were other audits.
It's a little strong, I think.
Well, it would have been helpful. We'll put it that way.
Well, maybe it wasn't finished.
Maybe it was done.
This was the first week of August, and we're now in the first week of October. Maybe it wasn't done. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt on that. That's all.
But the incompetence in the county is really stunning. I mean, with Sweeney, who got probation, giving herself bonuses that we didn't know about, and one of the fellows on the board still on the board, and Gary Best commenting.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
I agree.
It was stunning. It was very, very stunning in April of 2019. To me, certainly the stuff about Tucker, Stenger, who doesn't look good about much, was complaining about that for 2 years. Because Sam Page brought him in, and he had no qualifications whatsoever. Elliot Davis, others have done stories about this. I don't think anything in Nicole Galloway's audit was that stunning now. It's the stuff that was stunning to those of us that look like idiots was in April of 2019. But, I thought, I didn't really feel like I learned that much in this audit.
Hey, maybe I'll end on a kind of a lighter note and a good one, I think, and that is that the Webster-Kirkwood Times, Alvin Reid, is coming back. It's being published with a smaller staff, but a staff nonetheless. People knew that it was one of the great local newspapers, and we've got quite a few journalists on this panel. What do you think? Will the Webster-Kirkwood Times, with 9 employees, make it?
Well, let me tell you what, last Friday morning when that red wrapper was in my driveway, I really felt good about it. And I think that was the prevailing feeling throughout Webster and Kirkwood. And I was thrilled with the amount of advertisement that they had for the comeback issue. We'll see where it goes from there. But hey, I think they can make it because it's the Webster-Kirkwood Times. And I'm not bragging about Webster and Kirkwood. I'm just saying that it's a finite community. You know how many papers you have to throw. You know how much advertisement you have to get to stay in business. And you're not looking to grow or outreach or become the New York Times. And so, yeah, I'll give them a thumbs up.
Alvin, I'll brag on your community for you because I got to tell you, this is a slice of Americana as far as I'm concerned in the news business. What a great story. Don Corrigan and Dwight Biddecoffer deserve so much credit for the fight they fought, and then they sold it to their employees. It is Lynn Van House, who happens to be a film reviewer for me on Thursday nights, is their film reviewer. Very excited about this. Great. It's a great story, and people, because I have no financial interest in it, buy ads in it, folks, because it deserves it. It's the kind of community newspaper we need in this country still.
I agree. Here. I buy ads. I don't have an ad to buy, but yeah, support it, and I will do that.
Okay, very well. Tell you what, guys, we're going to take a quick break here, and then when we come back for part 2, Nichole Dawsey, who heads up the National Council on Alcohol and Drug Addiction. She's going to be with us. It's a wonderful organization based in St. Louis. It also has a new name. We'll give you the latest on that when Nichole Dawsey, the Executive Director of the NCADA, joins us in just a moment. We'd like to thank those who supported us by calling in the middle of the show and those dogs who are barking. And part 2, we don't know what's going to happen, but it's next on the 9 Network.
And it's Donnie Bash. Support us before that other throwaway newspaper.
Buy ads in the Riverfront Times, too, by the way.
And I apologize for the dogs barking. It was my neighbors. And
I think it was my dog.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Yes, it did.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Thanks for joining us for the second half of our program. We are pleased and proud to welcome Nichole Dawsey, the Executive Director from the NCADA, the National Council of Alcohol and Drug Abuse, based in St. Louis, joining us to answer our questions about this very important topic. Ms. Dawsey, thank you so much for joining us on the 9 Network.
Thank you for having me.
Well, if I might, I know during this pandemic, there have been many ramifications that people didn't expect. But from what we hear, alcohol sales are up, and we wonder if alcohol problems are also up. What do you know?
Yes and yes. So with alcohol sales being up, alcohol use disorders or people experiencing problems because of their drinking or consequences because of their drinking are absolutely up. And that is across the age range, both from teenagers, middle schoolers experimenting, all the way to seniors.
Wendy?
There was a story just within the last 12 hours, Ms. Dawsey, about the number of women who are feeling that drinking an extra couple of drinks or that heavy drinking among women over the course of a month is something that is becoming commonplace. Why do you suppose, or is there a reason why this is being reflected among women, and in such great numbers compared to our male counterparts? What's happening? Is it just the brand new frontier in the world that we live in terms of a pandemic? We've never been through this before. Does that have anything to do with it?
I think that's part of the explanation. So anytime there's feelings of isolation, uncertainty, stress, in the absence of healthy coping strategies, many times that can lead people to kind of self-medicate or use substances to numb the pain, to ease those feelings of loneliness and isolation. And as someone who has a 5-year-old who is trying to run an organization, do pretty much the bulk of the virtual schooling, keep it together, and have some sort of semblance of self-care, I can tell you that I'm really having to kind of draw into my bag of tricks for things that help soothe me. And some days, for some people where it just gets to be a little bit too tough, alcohol is absolutely something that they turn to. I will say that NCADA is not a prohibitionist organization, so we have no qualms with somebody feeling the desire to imbibe, provided that they're staying at home and they're setting a good example for their young people. We do start to get a little concerned, however, when alcohol or pills is what is used to deal with the stress of the pandemic.
Bill?
Nichole, we're rolling out the medicinal marijuana. It's going to be online soon, many of us hope. And once we have medicinal marijuana, it seems almost inevitable that the next thing will be recreational marijuana. How does your organization view that? Is this a good thing, or is it a dangerous thing?
Well, we certainly believe that cannabis, and that's how we like to refer to it, that cannabis does have some positive properties that when harnessed by doctors, that it certainly can aid in certain symptoms. We at NCADA are primarily concerned with the impacts of recreational marijuana on our young people. We know that as things become more normal and perceived as okay, that does create an environment for young people to start experimenting. And we also know that many of the cannabis products, quite candidly, are marketed to young people. We see that in the gummies and different products like that. And so I think that we are most concerned about what recreational could look like in Missouri because of its impact on young people. In terms of the medicinal impact, we've been watching that very closely. We do know that there are health conditions where medical cannabis might absolutely be the thing that helps adults deal with their conditions. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Hopefully I did.
Pretty much. I mean, it's a pretty broad question. So okay. Thank you very much, Nichole.
Thank you.
I will point out that those of us who plan to battle, perhaps on the other side from you, would prefer to use adult use rather than recreational when we put it on the ballot next year. But
language is everything, isn't it?
Well, but I think it's also part of the story. But let's talk about opioid.
Sure.
How much talk about the state of play, if it were, I guess that's the wrong phrase, of opioid, the crisis really in Missouri, and how your organization views and interacts with that.
So 2018 and 2019, we actually started to see a decrease in opioid-related deaths amongst every group except for Black males. And we know that that is terrible. And we know that that means that there's a lot of work that we as an organization and we in this field need to do. 2020, as Wendy pointed out with her question, brings a lot of uncertainty and feelings of anxiety and helplessness and despair. When we have any sort of economic instability, when we have an environment like this, where there is this overwhelming sense of doom, I would say, we often see deaths of despair, both overdoses and suicide. What I will say is that we received preliminary numbers yesterday, as a matter of fact, and we know that drug-involved deaths are up for every single group in 2020, most specifically for Black males and Black females. Overall, you're looking at a increase of 32% amongst the general population in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. For Black males and Black females, deaths are up by 54%. What do we...
Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the second part of your question is, what do we do? So a huge portion of what NCADA does is focus on upstream universal prevention for kids beginning in age kindergarten. No, we're not talking to them about heroin or methamphetamine. We're talking about the development of life skills and healthy coping strategies. But when we start dealing with adults who are experiencing substance use disorder and are at risk of a fatal overdose, we distribute Narcan or naloxone. We conduct trainings for professionals, emergency first responders, social service agencies, people who own fast food restaurants and gas stations about how to intervene in a medical emergency, about how to administer naloxone, and about the fact that addiction is a preventable chronic disease. It is not a moral failing. And it is not something we can just throw our hands up in the air and cast aspersions and say, well, if they just came from a better family, they wouldn't be in this position. So those are all things that my organization does to intervene and hopefully stem the tide. But there's a lot more work that we need to be doing. Alvin, I'm sorry, you had a question.
No, I interrupted you. My apologies. All right, there's no good analogy for this, but okay, so you're citing all these numbers and they're up, and it's kind of, I'm a conservationist, and my job is, kind of like, hey, you got to take care of the problem because there's too many deer. And then there's just this set of circumstances that happens over the last 6 months where you got 5 times as many. And you say that I need help, helping with this problem. And you're told, well, there's no more money. There's no this, there's no that. Handle it yourself. So that puts you in that position where your job obviously is so much harder, but the resources you need to do your job are not there. How are you handling that?
Well, I think actually that is a really great analogy because some people would say, well, are deer really that bad anyway? And you're like, yeah, we should really intervene with the deer. We need to help the deer and all of the consequences that could carry out if we don't tackle the deer. And so we have applied for, and many other organizations in this field have applied for various CARES money. Today, as a matter of fact, we just found out that we received some CARES money from the state to specifically support our early intervention services with teenagers. Now, teenagers are not, by and large, experimenting with opioids, but they are experimenting with other substances that, when left unchecked, could lead, doesn't always, but could lead to other circumstances. We also know that teens are feeling the effects, right? Their whole world is turned upside down. And when normally they would be at school. And so the gatekeepers would have eyes on them and would be able to notice something that is abnormal. Well, now that caregivers and parents, many of whom are struggling to keep their head on straight themselves, are trying to deal with their teen or are working outside of the home because they've been deemed essential and they don't necessarily have eyes on their teens who are working virtually, that has created a whole host of issues. And we know that not every teen who is getting drunk or is smoking some weed or is vaping, we know that not every teen they definitely do not need to go to treatment. We also know that they do not need to be introduced to the juvenile justice system. And so there's a lot of things that we can do upstream while we are distributing Narcan, working with FQHCs, Affinia Healthcare, in empowering some folks with lived experience to go into high-risk communities that have seen more overdose deaths, to be a one-on-one kind of peer support. So we're trying to tackle this really from a 360-degree view, both kind of stopping the bleed right now, and also, because a lot of us don't see any end in sight, trying to stop the bleed and maybe that could trickle down later on.
Ms. Dawsey, speaking of those teens, what exactly does the latest research tell us about the effects of cannabis on the developing brain?
So the research shows us that any psychoactive chemical on the teen brain can have effects most significantly on the prefrontal cortex, which is the last part of the brain to develop. It's this part right up here. It's the part of your brain that is essentially what makes you an adult. So it's in charge of reasoned decision-making, rational thought, and it's that part of your brain that helps you kind of think through long-term consequences. We know, again, that part of the brain does not stop finish growing until you're about 25. This is all relatively new research in the last 10 years or so, and new research is coming out every day. We also know that when middle schoolers, so now you're talking 12, 13, 14 years old, as they start to experiment, not only could there be some effects on their reason, their long-term consequences, but also on those things that any parent of a middle schooler will tell you are so important, like paying attention to detail, sitting still, not acting with your amygdala, which is your emotion center. There's obviously a lot more studies that need to be done, and that's actually something that NCADA advocates for, is the rescheduling of marijuana. We do not feel like people, most specifically Black and brown people, should be in jail for marijuana, for small amounts of marijuana. Absolutely not. And we also believe that it needs to be studied, because as I mentioned before, we know that there are some positive qualities to the cannabis plant, and we know that a heck of a lot more research needs to be done, and that cannot be done the way it is currently scheduled at the federal level.
It's an amazing thing you mentioned your child, and as the adult of grown children, or I'm sorry, I'm not an adult. My children are adults, but as the parent of two young adults, you feel like once they get out of college, it's like, whoo, you've crossed the finish line.
Right.
And yet, tragically and heartbreaking cases, Nichole, over the course of the last 7 to 8 months in our extended circle, there have probably been 5 to 7 fentanyl overdoses. Is there anything that you can say to young adults who think that they've got it all figured out, that this is something that I can control, and at least it's not heroin, because these are the kids, the young adults who are ending up losing their lives and destroying the people who love them. Can you offer any words of wisdom to those young people and older people, for heaven's sake?
Well, so fentanyl is a drug that it's the likes of which we've never seen. And the fact that it is being adulterated. It is being used to adulterate so many other drugs. I mean, the supply right now is dirty. And so I mentioned to you at the just a few minutes ago the number of overdoses that we're seeing that are up across the board, most specifically in Black and Brown communities. But what I will say is that notice I said drug-involved deaths. I did not specifically say opioid or fentanyl, because increasingly there's what's called polyuse, which is mixtures of stimulants, even methamphetamine, fentanyl, absolutely. And so when you're purchasing or acquiring these substances, you don't know what's in them. The potency is so much stronger than things that we've ever experienced. What I can say is that, you know, nobody grows up when they're little. Nobody says, when I grow up, I want to have a substance use disorder. Nobody says that. It's yet another reason why we begin at NCADA with universal prevention. We're talking to all kids from all zip codes, from all family dynamics, because some of this is genetic, and some of this, the bulk of this, is the fact that it changes your chemical brain structure. So we are talking about a chemical change that occurs, that you might think that you have the strongest will and the strongest, gumption that you're not going to get defeated. But these substances are so powerful that they're actually changing the dynamics of your brain chemistry. One of the things that we talk about is not just, how to recognize warning signs within yourself, but also how to recognize warning signs amongst people you love and care about, and how to intervene in a way that is done in a way that shows empathy, not judgment, and encourages them to seek some support. We have a whole website that's called talkaboutitmo.com, where you can find age-specific talking kits where you as a caregiver can talk to kids. We have one for pre-K to 2, one for 3rd through 5th grade, one through middle school, one for high school, and one for anybody that you suspect is using. Those are free. Those are available on your phone. Again, that's talkaboutitmo.com.
Nichole, when I used to write a regular column, I would hear often from people who recognized they had a problem or that their children did, but they couldn't get into a drug treatment center. We seem to have a shortment of drug treatment centers. How are we doing with that? If a person needs help, if a person says, I do have a monkey on my back, I want to stop this, can we guarantee that they can get into a treatment center, a residence program?
With insurance, sure. Without insurance, there will be a wait. Part of that is because of the reduced capacity limitations that COVID has created. Part of that is funding. Now, the state and federal pass-through dollars through what's called the SOR, which is State Opioid Response Grants, have definitely created more treatment opportunities. And yet, there's still not enough. So there are programs, we have one at NCADA, there are other programs as well, to where when somebody has identified that they are ready for treatment, they know that they need it, they meet the diagnostic criteria, they know that they need it, and they're motivated. If they cannot access a treatment bed right then and there because of lots of things, it could be access, it could be that they have a dog at home that they need to figure out how to get taken care of, or they have a job that they can't just up and leave. There are programs like something that we have where they can continue to meet pretty regularly with a counselor to keep up that motivation until a treatment bed becomes available.
Nichole?
Yes, sir.
Briefly coming back to cannabis, you referred to the schedules and the issues you have with them at the federal level. I wondered if you had similar issues at the state level with regard to how it's regarded in the law. And on that subject, how are we doing from a public policy standpoint in Missouri and perhaps in local health departments or whatever in providing adequate resources for prevention and treatment in general. In regard to substances in general.
So to your first question about marijuana, I think that we advocate for consistency. So it is very confusing when you go into a high school classroom and are trying to talk to a high schooler about what is legal here versus what is legal at the federal level versus what is legal across the river in Illinois. It is just very difficult. And so, not saying that because something's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. But in this case, it makes a lot of sense for us to achieve some consistency. So I would say that our position is that we would advocate for the same thing federally as is in the state. That's the first part of your question. Second part of your question, treatment dollars are becoming more available. There are ebbs and flows, certainly. The areas where we are still experiencing a lack of revenue or a lack of attention, and I think it's mostly because people don't understand it. Number one would be recovery supports, recovery housing, utilizing peers to be role models for just kind of lack of a better word to help people sustain their recovery. There are houses, there are programs, they are credentialed through the state of Missouri and across the board. More money for that is certainly needed. The other thing I will say is that right now, there is not $1 of the Missouri general revenue that goes towards prevention.
There's that, yeah.
That was surprising. And I was surprised. Nothing surprised me about Missouri, but that just kind of surprised me.
There is a federal pass-through primarily for community coalitions to address certain things, whether that's a marijuana dispensary that's coming in their neighborhood or a campaign to encourage parents to not host parties. But there is no money for upstream universal prevention in the general revenue.
Okay. Well, you probably found yourself in an odd position. Let's go back to, May and Memorial Day right about then. And all of the numbers, which are just drastic and terrifying, where you were now hearing them as a reason that we should now open up the economy. Everybody should go back to work. There is no COVID virus because of what's going on as far as alcohol and drug abuse. And here you are trying to do your job, but you're listening to say going back a few months.
So I think that, it puts us in a very difficult position. I mean, we are first and foremost a public health organization. So we decided pretty early on to actually close our offices in Olivet and to have our folks not be going into classrooms. So it was to unnecessarily expose themselves. So people want a binary option, right? They think it's either we open or we stay closed forever. It's either causing alcoholism or alcohol use disorder doesn't really exist, right? And it'll just go away. Like, people want this black or white idea. And the reality is, and you all know this as much as I do, that there's so much nuance. So is the fact that the economy is sluggish and that things are closed leading to more people with substance use disorders? Yes. And opening things up is not going to automatically make people suddenly learn how to cope any healthier. Right? So it's not that because schools are closed and because kids can't play sports, that suddenly those kids are now developing alcohol use disorders. That is one piece of a much larger part of the puzzle. And by the way, I am not advocating for kids to play sports. That is not my lane, and I am not a doctor. But there's so many more pieces of that puzzle.
Ms. Dawsey, we're just about out of time. Can you tell our viewers how they can get more information from the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse?
Yes. So if you are interested in learning more about how to talk to a loved one, you can absolutely go to talkaboutitmo.com. If you're interested in a free or very, very cheap, like $25 cheap assessment or referral because you might be concerned about yourself or a loved one, including a teenager, you can go to our website, which is ncada-stl.org, or call us at 314-962-3456.
Nichole Dawsey, thank you so much for your time and for joining us, of course, on the 9 Network. Best to you and your organization.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll be back next week at this time.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.